In this video today, I'm going to be showing you how to identify an edible agaric. The agarics are a great family of fungi because they have some really popular mushrooms in that grouping, such as the horse mushroom and the field mushrooms as well. There's over 40 species in this family in the UK, and the vast majority of them in that grouping are edible. There's a few poisonous members of that family, and there's a knack to identifying a fungi that is a member of the agaric family. Then within that grouping, you can use the forager's technique to narrow down whether it's edible or not. We use a technique, or sense of smell, to bring us down to a safe position where we are assured that the fungi we're eating or going to consume is going to be safe to eat. The agarics are categorised by their domed cream buff caps, which can turn slightly yellow with age. Sometimes they're scaly, depending on which species you have. Underneath the mushroom, when they're immature, they have a veil covering the gills, and over time that veil breaks off and it reveals the gills. Once the gills are revealed, the veil's broken off. Usually you're left with a skirt on the stipe. The gills can start out very pale to almost white, like with this specimen here. They will then turn pink with age, and when mature they'll be dark brown. The gills are also free from the stem, as you can see in this specimen here. The gills aren't actually attached to the stem. The stipe is cylindrical. At the base there is no bulbous base on the stipe. Sometimes it can be slightly swollen or clavate, a little bit like a club. Now, the reason why the base is really important with these fungi is because the main lookalike of concern is a species within the Amanita family. And this is a bulbous base here. This mushroom here I've got is a false death cap. As you can see, it looks remarkably similar to a young agaric. And the main difference here is this bulbous base, this swollen base, which has got a clearly defined edge to it, and as well you can see the remnants of the egg sac, which is the universal veil that the mushroom grew out of. It grew out of an egg. So you are using this to differentiate the agarics from any potential lookalikes in the Amanita family. The Amanita family is of concern because it has species in it like the death cap and the destroying angel. And when young, like with these agarics here, I'll hold them up together, the gill coloration is almost the same, and the caps are remarkably similar as well. So they're very hard to tell apart. And this is one of the main reasons why I believe the death cap is responsible for 90% of all deaths, all mushroom poisonings, because it can look so similar to an agaric. And I have actually walked up to a death cap from above, thought that looks like a nice agaric. Once I've picked it and revealed the universal veil and the bulbous base at the bottom, realised that it's actually a death cap. And vice versa, I've walked over to agarics and thought, oh, they look like death caps. And when I've picked them, they've turned out to be agarics. So they're very easily confused if you don't know what you're looking at. And it's really important when you're picking mushrooms, if you don't know what they are, to excavate them, pick the whole fungi, make sure you get the base as well, because this base can help distinguish any potential lookalikes, especially some seriously poisonous ones, deadly, such as the death cap. Once you are sure you have an agaric in your hand and it's not a member of the Amanita family, it's nothing else untoward, this only works with the agarics, you want to find out whether it's going to be an edible member of that grouping. There's about three or four species within that grouping which are slightly poisonous. They'll give you gastric upset, so nothing too serious. Those are known as the yellow stainers. Agaric xanthodermis, and you also have the inky mushroom as well, which I typically find in woodlands. And that group there, the sort of 3 or 4 within that grouping that are slightly poisonous, they all typically stain yellow in the base. Now I've got a mushroom here, an Agaric, which I found earlier, and I've just scratched the base with my knife. I can see here the base of the stem is staining yellow. So for me this is a red flag, a big red flag that this is potentially going to be a poisonous member of the Agaric grouping. Sometimes the other members, your horse mushroom for example, they can also stain a bit yellow, usually more so in the cap and in the stipe, not so often in the base. It's very infrequent in the base. And the poisonous members, they don't always stain yellow in the base. It's one of the most common places you will find them staining yellow. It's not always a feature that is consistent, but it's more consistent than most of the other features, except for one. The main feature you're going to be using as a forager is your sense of smell. So when you find an Agaric, you want to give it a smell as well. You want to give it a sniff. Smell the mushroom. And I can smell that this mushroom, it smells unpleasant. It doesn't have a nice smell to it. This one here is the one that's been staining yellow in the base, which I just cut. So this one here has got an unpleasant smell to it, and that feature is consistent throughout the poisonous members of that grouping. The yellow stainer, it has an unpleasant smell. Some people say like iodine or hospitals. You have the inky mushroom, which has an unpleasant smell. It smells quite strongly of ink, Indian ink. The edible members of the Agaric grouping, they all have a pleasant smell, and the pleasant smell can vary from mushroomy, such as with the field mushrooms. It can be strongly of aniseed, such as with the horse mushroom for example, or it can smell strongly of almonds as well. But they'll always have a pleasant fragrance to them, unlike the poisonous members of that grouping. So being sure that this is an Agaric, I've got a different species here to the one I just held up, which was staining yellow in the base and had an unpleasant smell. And being sure that this is an Agaric, as you can see, it's got no bulbous base on it. The base is slightly swollen, but it's not bulbous. And the gills, they're young, they're slightly off colour, slightly grey. They're not pure white like members of the Amanita family, although they're very, very pale. So, we all see colours slightly differently. It's not always possible to distinguish young members by the gill colour. The base is a much stronger feature to be going by. But once you're sure you've got an Agaric in your hand, the next step I'm going to be taking with this one here, as this is a different species, it's just rolled away, I'm going to scratch the base and see if there's any change in colour. So I've scratched the base on this one, and I can see that thus far there's no change in colour and there's no yellow bruising there. And I'll retrieve this runaway cap, and the cap, I'm going to give it a smell. And this one here, this smells divine, it smells beautiful. It smells very strongly of aniseed, and I also get hints of almonds in there. This has got a really beautiful scent to it. So that is the forager's technique to tell if you have an edible Agaric. This is a video that I've been meaning to make all year, because I know quite a lot of people ask me how to identify an edible Agaric. I probably won't get down to species level with this at this moment. I would identify it as Agaricus silvicola, but within that grouping there's about 3 others at least that are known in the UK and to break them apart in that grouping, you need microscopy and DNA sequencing. So Agaricus silvicola is the most likely identification for this fungi here, but I'm not 100% sure exactly what it is. Something I am 100% sure of is that it's edible. And that's what you need to know when you are out foraging, if you are foraging for agarics or you're lucky enough to find some.